oil and water, your hand in a wasp's nest, wrestlers and retirement. Some things just don't go well together. And no matter how many times and how vehemently wrestlers profess to be done, swear down, pinky promise, this one isn't a work, brother, etc., the odds are that they will be back in the ring the minute that they're offered attractive enough compensation or are presented with a tantalizing storyline to sink their teeth into. Because despite not just what the actual wrestling itself, but the outlaw lifestyle and constant travel does to your body, wrestling is addictive and hard to say goodbye to, even if every inch of you wants to cry out in pain. Sometimes a performer needs the adulation of the crowd as much as they need the payoff, and it's now expected that wrestlers will go back on their word or a match stipulation in order to feed the beast. Even the ones you really think are gonna make it usually do end coming back, even if it's in a far-off foreign land just to piss about with their mates. The Undertaker's recent revelation that he's finished was met with suppressed snickers, but retirement can stick, as proven by the following. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and these are 10 wrestlers who stayed retired. Join us. Number 10, Layla. Layla took an unconventional route to WWE, entering and eventually winning the 2006 Diva Search competition, which secured her a one-year contract worth $250,000 dues. Not much was guaranteed beyond that point, and other WWE superstars who have come into the fold via the reality talent show door have had, shall we say, mixed results. But the beautiful Brit stuck at it and proved herself time and time again, whether she was enlisted as a member of a dance troupe, managing, or indeed wrestling. Layla's most memorable role in the company was tagging with Michelle McCool as Lay Cool, the pair of mean girls having some standout feuds and matches with the likes of Beth Phoenix, Natalya, and Mickie James. Layla won the Divas title once and is recognized as the final women's champion after unifying the belts. But while she certainly developed into a great in-ring performer, injuries took their toll, particularly a nasty knee injury that kept her out of action for almost a year, which may have played a part in her decision to retire from wrestling in 2015 at the age of 38. She has been true to her word since, turning down the chance to return in any capacity and instead focusing her efforts on her real estate career and marriage to fellow former WWE star Ricky Ortiz. Number 9, Jack Briscoe. Jack Briscoe was a proper bloke, a real man's man. No, not that one. Just looking at pictures of him makes me want to go and hammer some drywall and shoot a wild animal in the face. And as an NWA heavyweight champion in the 1970s, Jerry's brother simply had to be made of sterner stuff in order to go an hour with Terry Funk or Harley Race and then smash 10 beers before bedtime and then doing it all again the next day. An amateur and pro wrestling standout who is regarded as one of the best technical wrestlers of all time, Jack Briscoe had a stellar career in the territories and in Japan before finding his way to WWE in 1984, him and his brother helping facilitate the sale of Georgia Championship Wrestling to Vince McMahon as part of the process. But despite being in the so-called big time, Jack knew when to call it a career, and in the middle of a daunting snowstorm that left him unable to feel his own hands and face, he realized that he was physically and mentally ready to leave the business. So he did at the age of 43, going home and never looking back, staying retired from 1985 until his passing in 2010. A Hall of Fame inductee in 2008, Humble Jack was content to run the Briscoe Brothers body shop in Tampa, Florida, once he had hung up his boots. Number 8, Christian. Sometimes the decision to retire is not one that the wrestler can make themselves, especially when it concerns head trauma like concussions. Back in the bad old days, you could treat a concussion with a fifth of Jack Daniels and a couple of unprotected chair shots, but thankfully, WWE now does their best to safeguard their employees and will keep them out of the ring unless they pass stringent tests and are medically cleared to compete. One man that will never be cleared to compete in a WWE ring is Christian, who had his last proper match on the March 24, 2014 episode of Raw. Due to recurrent concussions and other injuries, WWE decided that Christian could no longer wrestle. And while some wrestlers, including famously his tag team partner and best friend Edge, have come back from supposedly career-ending injuries, there is no chance that Captain Charisma will get the green light to put the tights back on. He was involved in a physical confrontation and an unsanctioned match, No It Doesn't Count, with Randy Orton in early 2020, fueling speculation that a return to the ring was on the horizon, but that is simply not the case. WWE's policy with regards to the nature of Christian's injury means it just will not happen, and since he's not about to go against the organization and try his luck elsewhere, he remains indefinitely on the injured list. Number 7, The Ultimate Warrior. The Ultimate Warrior had a very simple business philosophy when it came to wrestling. Get in, make as much money as humanly possible, and then get out. Warrior was, if nothing else, a pretty shrewd businessman who knew his worth and wasn't taking bumps for the love of the sport. While he mostly performed to the best of his abilities for the fans when he actually showed up, Warrior was in wrestling for financial gain. Hell, why else do you think he held Vince McMahon up for perceived money owed on multiple occasions? And Warrior did become a millionaire through his exploits in the grap game, making a ton of cash in the late 1980s and early 90s. Which is why, after leaving WWE, he didn't need to hit the indies or the convention circuit to pay the bills. He did, however, take a lucrative offer with WCW in 1998. Eric Bischoff and the boys were throwing silly money around in a bid to win the Monday Night Wars, and the face-painted madman made another 7 figures for wrestling essentially one actual match. Afterwards, he retired, and barring a one-off match in Italy in 2008, didn't wrestle again before his death in 2014. Number 6. Kenta Kabuki. Quite the opposite to Warrior, Kenta Kabuki loved nothing more than professional wrestling. By rights, Kabuki could and possibly should have retired in the 90s, the punishing All Japan main event style taking its toll on the Iron Man, who went under the knife for knee and elbow surgeries about as regularly as some folks take out the garbage. The former Triple Crown and GHC heavyweight champion took immense pride in giving his all every time out, but the dedication to the performance seriously took its toll. Kabuki was advised on many occasions to quit wrestling, but he always somehow managed to come back, displaying the type of fighting spirit that made him one of the most popular stars in Japan. Even when diagnosed with kidney cancer in 2006, Kabuki vowed to return to the squared circle, doing so a year and a half later in an emotional scene. However, all good things must come to an end, and he decided to give his aching body a well-earned rest, wrestling his retirement match on May 11th, 2013. Teaming with 3 fellow legends, the foursome downed Kabuki proteges, and it was the perfect ending to a remarkable career, and Kabuki has stayed away since. Number 5. JBL. Fearful rookies rejoiced when John Bradshaw Layfield decided to bow out from active competition in May of 2006. The former WWE champion and one-man backstage welcoming committee was forced to retire due to a broken back. Credit to JBL, on his last night as a SmackDown roster member, he did drop the United States title in emphatic fashion to Bobby Lashley before putting over World Heavyweight Champion Rey Mysterio later in the evening and getting the na 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 hey 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 goodbye for good measure. He then transitioned into a role as an announcer and gave interviews stating his wrestling days were done. How surprising then when he got into it with Chris Jericho at the tail end of 2007 and found himself back on the road full-time a short while later. The one-time acolyte had a productive second stint and often found himself battling for world titles or otherwise in programs with top stars like John Cena or Shawn Michaels. But that knackered back and those dodgy knees had never fully healed, and the time had come for JBL to retire once again in 2009. In a nice bit of symmetry, it was another match with Rey Mysterio that proved to be Bradshaw's last. He dropped the Intercontinental title to the Masked Man at WrestleMania 25 in 21 seconds before getting on the mic to say he quit and confirming the retirement on WWE.com the day after. Number 4. Scott Hall. If cats have 9 lives, Scott Hall has, at least, 6.5? The bad guy had burned most of his bridges and almost ended his life, let alone his professional associations, yet still managed to be massively influential during an often turbulent Hall of Fame career. Hall, who has struggled with addiction issues over the years, was once a dynamic performer who combined his size and athleticism with a natural charisma and love of the business to wonderful effect. As Razor Ramon, he was both beloved and reviled, and he and best friend Kevin Nash changed the business forever when they jumped ship to WCW and spearheaded the New World Order. That proved to be the peak for Hall though, as his post-WCW days were marred by controversy and a declining performance level. After a short spell in WWE, Hall bounced around and found work in TNA, where he remained off and on for 8 years. In 2010, Hall found himself in possession of the TNA Tag Team titles, but was forced to vacate them due to ongoing legal issues. And that was that. Hall, then only 51, left the ring due to escalating health and personal problems and hasn't worked a match since, staying retired and only making the occasional appearance as a manager or in another non-physical capacity. Number 3. AJ Lee. How often does a lifelong fan decide to say goodbye to the wrestling industry before their 30th birthday at the top of their game and with their health and sanity just about intact? Not very often at all, but AJ Lee set a precedent when she retired in April of 2015. Lee's WWE career was relatively short, but she managed to pack a lot in during her time in Titan. A contestant on the third series of NXT, AJ came third but found herself on the main roster a short time later, tagging with Caitlyn as the Chickbusters. An on-screen romance with Daniel Bryan helped raise her profile, and she soon found herself at the center of WWE storylines, getting mixed up with not only Bryan, but Kane and future husband CM Punk. Lee grew as an in-ring performer and became Divas Champion on 3 separate occasions, developing a dedicated fan base who were drawn to her nerdy every girl persona. Fans and her co-workers were equally inspired by her outspokenness, her pipe bomb promo addressing the disparity between male and female WWE superstars being looked at as a turning point in the women's revolution. Just a couple of months after that promo, however, AJ was a former WWE star, deciding to retire due to a spinal injury that was reportedly non-career threatening, but more importantly, a sense of fulfillment in all that she had accomplished. Number 2, CM Punk. Of course, another reason for AJ Lee's retirement was the fractious situation between the company that signed her checks and the man she married. The salty straight-edge superstar famously walked out of the company the night after the 2014 Royal Rumble, long frustrated and beyond burned out. The manner of his exit naturally ruffled a few feathers, and Punk became persona non grata. Not that the Second City Saint was bothered, as he was set on chasing a dream of becoming a UFC fighter. Quick note to any impressionable kids out there, by the way, it's not always advisable to chase your dreams, particularly if that dream involves men trying to kick you in the head or snap your arm in half for fun. Punk poured a dump truck full of gasoline onto the fire with accusations made during his notorious appearance on Colt Cabana's Art of Wrestling podcast, and despite being signed by Fox to work as an analyst for their backstage show, the fences have yet to be properly mended. Not that Punk is itching to return to the ring, of course. The voice of the voiceless has turned down several big money offers to return for other promotions, and given his age, physical condition, and the fact that he's already had a legendary decades-long career in the business, I wouldn't put any money on it being clobbering time anytime soon. Number 1, Steve Austin. You would think that if anyone was going to come out of retirement for what would surely be an astronomical payday, how about half the oil in Saudi Arabia, Steve, then it would be Stone Cold. Austin is, by any measurable, one of, if not the biggest star the business has ever seen, generating as much revenue as many small countries managed during his record-setting run as WWE's main man. Though it only lasted a few magnificent years, the money made during Austin's Attitude Era glory days allowed him to comfortably ride off into the sunset and live a more than comfortable life for the rest of his days. Not that the Texas Rattlesnake actually wanted to say goodbye to the 20x20 canvas on which he plied his trade. A true blue fan of the business, Austin would have likely continued on for many years had he been physically able to. But his body, particularly his neck and knees, were shot, and he knew it was over after putting the Rock over at WrestleMania 19. He's obviously been no stranger to our screen since, taking on the role of authority figure or guest referee when called upon, but the bionic redneck has thus far resisted the temptation and has stuck to his day job of podcast host and alcohol awareness ambassador.